World. My name is Dr. Shaham Das. I'm a consultant forensic psychiatrist. I assess mentally disordered offenders for a living so that you don't have to. You can call me the ominous Shahamanist. Now, I saw this recent video with Busta Rhymes, and it is the Diary of a CEO with Stephen Bartlett. I'm sure you've heard of the guy. I was fascinated by the video. There's a lot to say from a psychiatric perspective. So this video is going to be me analysing Busta Rhymes' mental health as a psychiatrist, what I would do if I was diagnosing him and assessing him. And also I'm going to tell you a bit about my favourite Busta Rhymes tune. Before any of that, let me just whet your appetite with the beginning of the video.
This is the Busta Rhymes that none of us have ever seen before. Busta Rhymes says it himself. This is a Busta Rhymes that nobody's ever seen before. You will walk away from this conversation understanding not only what it takes to reach the very peak of your powers, but to stay there for 33 years. To have the insane consistency, discipline, dedication, and in his words, addiction to something that will take you to the very top. But then also you'll see the forces in life that take you from that peak to the deepest depths of darkness. And once you're in that darkness, how do you rise from it? How did Busta take himself from the darkest moment of his life that he's really not talked about ever before, back to the peak of his powers? This is a human story. It's one of the most inspiring stories we've ever had on this show. And it's a side of a guy that we've known for many, many decades that I have never seen before. Thank you to Busta for this conversation.
Okay, so that's a pretty intriguing intro, isn't it? So this whole video is over an hour and a half long. I'm focusing on a specific bit, which is about Busta's mental health. So to put this into context, he lost his friend, Chris Lighty, in 2012. Not only was he Busta's friend, but he was also Busta Rhymes' manager. If you're a true hip-hop head from that era, you will know that death, it was actually, he took his own life, affected so many people, and it rocked the hip-hop world. For example, Fat Joe and 50 had beef before then. They became friends, and they got together over the kind of shared grief, I suppose, of this incident. Anyways, I'm going to take you to a specific bit.
With the bags, and his body was in the bags. That's when you knew Chris was never coming back. So, the crying started, and a lot of arguing started. A lot of threats started. And my life was going in a whole other direction after that. And I didn't like it. Because I was confused about how to move. And I was lost for a minute. Because I never really had to manage my career without a manager. And he wasn't just a manager, he was my brother. So it got scary for a minute. I couldn't get it together. That's why I didn't put out no record for 9 years.
Okay, so, and this is an obvious thing to say, this is not psychiatric diagnosis. You don't need lots of letters after your name to see this, but it just kind of popped out to me is you can see Busta's body language changing when he's talking about this. If you compare it to the beginning of the video, he's a lot more animated. I mean, he's the guy who said, "Woo-ha, put you all in check." He's a very kind of animated, energetic guy, whereas here, his body language is completely changed. He's not making eye contact. I think he's bottling up a lot of emotions. He's probably on the edge of crying and is trying to stop doing that. He's slowed down his speech. So yeah, it's so clear, isn't it, that this is a deep, deep trauma that's still affecting him. But anyway, let's hear more about the content and then I'll analyze it.
And I started to just do different type of business with signing artists, and that's when we put out OT Genesis, and we had some really good success with him.
So you're actually crying there.
And signed a few other artists, this one artist by the name of Stove God Cooks, and I signed, another young artist by the name of Murder Mook, and I wasn't happy though with just doing it like that, and I didn't feel comfortable putting out music until I got the right support system in place, and I couldn't get it together.
When you say you couldn't get it together, what does that mean?
That means like
psychologically you couldn't get it together.
Psychologically, I couldn't get it together because I didn't feel like I had a support system that I could believe in enough to make me feel like I am psychologically able to move with the comfort, the confidence, and the support that I know I'm going to need. And the responsibility of trying to wear all of the hats myself, I was doing it, but I wasn't doing it at the level that Chris Lighty was able to do it.
You agree with...
So there's a few things there to unpack, isn't there? He's talking about not being able to kind of manage all of this responsibility. Now, if you look at it superficially, I suppose you could argue that it could be to a degree to do with logistics, right? So he's not an experienced manager. Chris Lighty is doing all those things for him. But I think everyone would agree that there's something beyond that here, isn't there? There's natural grief, and then sometimes that can spread into actual clinical depression. I would argue that 9 years is a very long time for it to be just pure grief. So I think on balance, it's probably related to some of the symptoms of depression, like a lack of energy, lack of motivation, lack of self-esteem, poor confidence levels, negative kind of pessimistic cognitions. I suppose the question that I would ask myself as a psychiatrist is where... First of all, what's the line between what is normal, natural grief and depression? But probably more important than that, why medicalize it? So I'm sure some of you watching this are thinking, just let the poor man grieve. Why are you calling it depression? And I would, my answer to that would be, I think it's important to diagnose if it is something else, if it is depression, because first of all, you're giving it a name. But secondly, if hypothetically speaking, he needed treatment, say on the NHS, if you have a diagnosis, then it's going to bump you up that waiting list. It's a sad state of affairs, and it's not something that I'm happy about as a psychiatrist, but that's the truth. If you have a diagnosed depression, you're more likely to be able to get something like cognitive behavioral therapy, as opposed to it being just pure grief. The other thing is he used that term support system several times, didn't he? So that obviously was something that was kind of important to him or lacking for him at that time. And I think that if you don't have the right support system, the right cathartic people to talk to about it, then these negative cognitions, this depression, this grief can kind of fester and it can harbour within you, and it never really resolves.
At the same time?
Absolutely. Because I lost my father 2 years after Chris. The two most important male figures in my life. Chris was gone 2012. I lost my father 2014.
And you'd reconciled with him before?
I definitely reconciled with him before he passed. The problem is I didn't get to enjoy my time with him once we got good. So that was a horrible feeling too. Because it's like all of the time that was wasted fucking not getting along was stupid. Fucking stupid. You know what I'm saying?
So this is actually, quite a good insight into his emotional state and his regret. So again, for those of you, my Psych for Sore guys and gals who've not seen this whole video, he was talking earlier on in his life when he was getting into hip hop and wanted to become a rapper at quite a young age. His father was an electrician. His father would make him come to work, and he was very dismissive of Busta's intentions to become a rapper. To be fair, in that era, there wasn't really, there wasn't that many superstar rappers around. So it was hard for a parent to imagine that their son could become something like this. So this caused this conflict. So his father was forcing him to work and trying to get him to become an electrical engineer and continue the business that his father created from scratch. Young Busta became quite angry and quite resentful because he wanted to be out doing his own thing. He said earlier on in this interview that he now understands that he's a parent, now he's much older and more mature, that his father had the right intentions for him, even if they disagreed. And this caused a rift in their relationship, which he later regretted. You can hear him talk about it just now in the clip I played you. And I suppose my analysis of this is that it feels like both of them are to blame. Actually, I'm going to take that back. Sorry, I said the word blame. That's not very compassionate. It's not very fair. I think blame's the wrong word. But I think both of them had the responsibility and the opportunity to try and mend this rift. All they had to do was try and understand the other person's perspective. So Busta, as I said, he did, when he was older, I think after his father's death, understood that his dad was just trying to look out for him. And his father has to understand that Busta was passionate about something to the degree that he made it. To make it mainstream as a rapper is extremely hard to do, and you need a lot of commitment and effort, which Busta eventually had. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that neither of them, from my perspective, was right or wrong. They just saw things in a different way. And it's a shame that damaged their relationship for a period of time, but also a good thing that they reconciled eventually.
That's part of the reason why I started to really get unhealthy and fucked up. I was trying everything to drown the pain and the frustration and the suffering of those losses. overworking, over drinking, over smoking weed and cigarettes. And it got so bad that I got to the weight of 340 pounds. I've never been that. I'm not even built to be that heavy. It's funny. It's like I look back at certain pictures and I looked at how overweight I was. I look at my skin. Yeah, there's certain pictures I had. I had these like marks on my face. I hate those pictures. Like I see the darkness in those pictures, yo.
There's this book called The Body Holds the Score, but the title is just the thing that I've actually gained the most from. It just says that when there's things going on in our psychology and our mind, the body will show it.
Yeah, man.
We'll eat, we'll drink, we won't sleep, but you'll see it in the body before you see it in the mind. The mind is invisible, obviously.
Right.
The body is the first place to see it. And I was reading through that phase of your life, and you were on sort of breathing machines when you were sleeping and things like that.
Nah, I wasn't on a breathing machine. I had sleep apnea.
Oh, you had sleep apnea.
Yeah. I had sleep apnea. I was
You drank yourself into a coma at one point?
I drank myself into, not a coma, I drank myself into an inability to wake myself up.
Oh, okay.
Okay, going to stop that there, and I'll kind of talk about what he's talked about. One sec. Just reattaching this. Talk amongst yourselves. Okay, so I don't know if you guys ever saw pictures of Busta Rhymes when he was at his heaviest, but he was like morbidly obese. There's no question about that. And he had sleep apnea, so that's a breathing problem while you're sleeping usually because you're overweight. There are other reasons like structural problems, but let's not get into that. So as a psychiatrist, what do I think about that? Well, I think everybody is aware of the cognitive symptoms of depression. They're pretty obvious, low mood, negative cognition such as pessimism and poor self-worth. I think people are less aware necessarily of the biological symptoms of depression. So things like a lack of energy, poor sleep, a lack of appetite, lack of sex drive, which is libido. You can even get physical kind of aches and pains related to depression known as somatization. I think Busta Rhymes had the opposite of some of these things. So usually, as I said, you have a lack of appetite, although in some exceptional cases, and it's rare, from my clinical experience, I'd say maybe less than 10% of people that present with a severe depression, they get the opposite. So they get increased appetite, and it can be in the form of comfort eating or binge eating. We psychiatrists, we like to sound clever, so we call it hyperphagia. It just means eating too much. So I think that's exactly what Busta Rhymes had. I don't think he had an eating disorder, but if I was, as a decent psychiatrist, you should always look at all the symptoms and rule out anything else that it could be. So that symptom, not Busta's whole presentation, but that symptom, overeating, obviously is associated with bulimia. It's a common misconception that people who have bulimia always lose weight, whereas in actual fact, sometimes they can gain weight from binge eating. I don't think Busta was suffering from that because he had all these other symptoms of depression, number one. Number two, it's really unusual for somebody that late in their age to develop something like that. And number three, from what we know about him, he didn't have a problematic relationship with food. Also, you generally get a lack of sleep with depression. You have what we in psychiatry call early morning awakening, which is what it sounds like. You wake up earlier than you want to and struggle to get back to sleep, versus typically initial insomnia in anxiety, which is where you struggle to get to sleep in the first place. But I think Busta had neither of those. I think he had the opposite. I think he had hypersomnia, so he was sleeping too much. I'm not going to play the rest of the clip, but basically there's a happy ending to it. So he had a bit of a wake-up call when his own son was worried that he might have died one day when he was drunk himself unconscious and had to go to the hospital. And his own doctor noticed his breathing problems and thought that Busta Rhymes was at a risk of dying there and then because his breathing was so kind of laboured. But he turned his life around, got a personal trainer, became ultra hench and ultra fit. So there's a happy ending to that, which I'm glad. Okay, so I'm going to change tact a little bit. Here's what I would have done if Busta Rhymes was my patient and I had to assess him. I'm talking about back in that time period, not now after his recovery, because I'd have very little to say. But if he presented with that prolonged grief, which I think turned into a depression, first of all, I try and decide if it was actual depression versus actual grief. And as I've said a few times, I think for all the other symptoms, biological symptoms, and for the time period, this is more depression than grief. And I would start him on some therapy. Talking therapy initially. I'd be reluctant to start him on any antidepressant medication initially because there seems to be direct reasons that was causing his depression, i.e. grieving over his friend, and that's not going to be reversed with a medication. And as you'll know, medications have side effects. So I'd only suggest antidepressants if he's tried all the therapy and it didn't work. The next thing I'd do is I would look at his support system. So he said several times that he didn't have the support system around him. And I'm speculating here, but I do wonder whether part of that is the machoism, the kind of image, the persona that he's creating as being this famous, sort of quite tough, funny, out there, entertaining, confident rapper. So I wonder whether there's, even though he was sort of popular as a personality, as a musician, I do wonder whether he actually had close friends and people that he felt he could confide in. I think he didn't, because that was indicated in what he was saying. So I'd encourage him to put that in place. And the other one, pretty obvious, and he did it eventually, is health. So if somebody is that overweight and they're not looking after themselves, then regular exercise will release endorphins. So that's how I treat my man Busta Rhymes. Okay, so I'm going to change tact, almost finished. I'm going to tell you my favourite Busta Rhymes tunes. Got to be honest, I really like Busta as an individual and in terms of his personality. He's not one of my favourite rappers. I actually bought a Busta Rhymes album way back in, maybe it was at 96, and I was a bit underwhelmed. Most of the tunes that I like that he's on are actually him featuring on A Tribe Called Quest. So there's One Two Shit, love that tune, go check it out. Oh My God, Tribe Called Quest featuring Busta Rhymes, that's another one of my favourite tunes. If I was thinking about tunes that he was on, just him, my favourite tune of his has to be Fire It Up, which, as you'll know, is the Knight Rider themed thing. In fact, I'm a little bit embarrassed to admit this, but I used to try and rap myself when I was at university. And the very first time I rapped in public, I memorised all of Fire It Up. This was back in 1998, and I rapped it at some friends at a birthday party. It was about 80% as cringe as you think it would have been. But that's, yeah, so that was my first kind of entry into rapping. No, it's true. Honestly, I did. You want me to prove it? Oh, come on. I can't. I'm not going to do that. No, honestly, I don't. I be the street kid, the ninjas you want to freak with. Put your ninjas that all know how to keep a secret. When I get money, you know I like to keep it. How I get money, ninjas are trying to peep it. Flip mode be ninjas you want to form a team with. Them get money ninjas, that the ones to pick the scheme with. The ninjas that used to be getting money frequent. The ones I would always measure my triple beam with. Until they start taking my ninjas to the precinct. That's all the back in the day, or that ain't nothing recent. Because nowadays it be bitches we like to speak with, eat with, lay him down to sleep with. Type of pussy that makes a ninja want to keep it. Shorty be so exotic, she looking decent. A lot of corny ninjas be offering whack free shit. I can't hold the heat no more, you I gotta release it. What y'all wanna? Sorry, I do apologize. So that comes the rest of that comes to the end of my video. If you're interested, I actually once battle rapped on a TV game show called Don't Hate the Playaz, me versus another doctor. It was yeah. If you want to see who won, you're gonna have to click the link in the description below. Hope you enjoy it. Until then, have a blessed day. Let me know in the comment section below what you think of Busta Rhymes, what you think of his mental health issues, whether I've missed anything important, what you think your favourite tune of his is, and of course, if there are any other videos that you want me to react to. Peace out.